the unusual banquet and the reunion. This is Joseph part 6, and it's based out of Genesis 43, 44, and 45. And so I'm going to read just a couple of verses out of Genesis 43, starting in verse 16. And I won't read that whole portion, but a little bit of it. So this is Genesis 43 in verse 16. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to his house steward, "Bring the men into the house and slay an animal and make ready, for the men are to dine with me at noon." So the man did as Joseph said and brought the men to Joseph's house. Now the men were afraid because they were brought to Joseph's house, and they said, "It is because of the money that was returned in our sacks the first time that we are being brought in, that he may seek occasion against us and fall upon us and take us for slaves with our donkeys." So they came near to Joseph's house steward and spoke to him at the entrance of the house and said, "O my lord, we indeed came down the first time to buy food, and it came about when we came to the lodging place that we opened our sacks, and behold, each man's money was in the mouth of his sack, our money in full. So we have brought it back in our hand. We have also brought down other money in our hand to buy food. We do not know who put our money in our sacks." He, that's the steward, said to them, "Be at ease, do not be afraid. Your God and the God of your father has given you treasure in your sacks. I had your money." Then he brought Simeon out to them. And we'll pause there. So here we are on lesson part 6 of the life of Joseph. And the intro paragraph. Sometime, possibly about a year and a half, has passed since Joseph recognized his 10 older half-brothers in the line to buy grain. Simeon has been in prison waiting for his brothers to return with Benjamin. Meanwhile, Joseph, now aged 40, continues his job of managing Egypt's reserves of grain, selling to both the Egyptians and to foreigners. Finally, one morning, 2 years into the 7 years of severe famine, Joseph recognizes his brothers in line again, this time with Benjamin. Number 1, what orders did Joseph give his steward? From verse 16, "Bring the men into the house and slay an animal and make ready, for the men are to dine with me at noon." So the men, worried, told Joseph's steward about their money being returned to them and that they had brought double to pay for both purchases of grain. How did the steward respond? "Be at ease, do not be afraid. Your God and the God of your father has given you treasure in your sacks. I had your money." Very intriguing. Interesting to ponder. Why would Joseph's steward make reference to God like this? Egyptians are polytheists. They believe in a whole bunch of gods. But the steward here is singling out, your God and the God of your father has given you treasure. So what is one possible implication of this? They learned about God through Joseph, possibly. You can't be definitive on it now. It would be more definitive if the steward had used a different name for God. What would that name have been if it were a different one? Yahweh or Jehovah. And that's really God's name, and that would indicate a personal knowledge of some kind. The word that's used here is Elohim, and it's a standard sort of generic term for God, a title. But it is intriguing that the steward does say to these men, your God and the God of your father, whatever that means, has given you treasure in your sack. Number 3, when Joseph came home at noon, what did his brothers bring to him? A present of some of the best products of the land: balm, honey, aromatic gum and myrrh, pistachio nuts, and almonds. So most of these would be considered kind of luxury items. They're expensive, they're luxurious. They're not necessarily native to Egypt. They're not cultivated or grown in Egypt that much, at least. And so these would be from Canaan, and they'd be like, Lori and I just went to visit Lori's family last week, and we brought New England products to share with the family there. maple syrup and those kinds of things. And you share, what you have from your native land. And so these are gifts given to Joseph, because remember, the brothers are all thinking of Joseph as the prime minister of Egypt. They don't know who he is. So they're trying to get in good, You can almost insert the word bribe in place of gift, because they're trying to smooth things out. It hasn't been going that good. And so they're trying to make it as smooth as possible for the negotiations and so on. So number 4, how did they give this? Out of verse 26, they bowed to the ground before him. Now that should ring a bell. What does that sound like? The dreams that Joseph had a long time ago, a couple of them actually. One was sheaves of grain, sheaves of wheat in a field, and they're all bowing down to him. And the next one, the next night, was the sun, the moon, and the stars all bowing down to him. And on that occasion, you might even remember, Jacob rebuked Joseph and said, "Son, you really think that your mother and I are going to bow down?" But then it says, back in chapter 37, that Jacob kept this in mind. And now, here it is. All these years later, they are, in fact, they don't know who he is, but they're on the ground bowing down to the prime minister. So, number 5, who did Joseph ask after? Jacob, their father. Number 6, now Joseph sees his baby brother Benjamin. The last time he saw him 23 years ago, Benjamin was a 2-year-old toddler. Now he is a full-grown man of 25. What does he say? May God be gracious to you, my son. It's a benediction. It's a blessing. But, now there's several reasons why Joseph feels, and he's going to get broken up over Benjamin. There's several reasons why this is the case. Can you think of a couple of them? Full brother. So they're both sons of Rachel, whereas all the others are half-brothers to Benjamin and Joseph. And what else? All those years he hasn't seen his brother, 23 years, and he didn't get to watch him grow up. He didn't get to pal around with him. And now here he is. And he's the baby of the family, just like Joseph used to be. So there's a lot of connections here. Number 7, what effect did seeing Benjamin have on Joseph? He hurried out to weep, deeply stirred over his brother. So he evidently was losing control of his emotions, and he had to get out of the room, went to a different room, and he cried, and then he washed his face so nobody would know, and then he comes back in. You wonder what were, did the Egyptian cook get mad because, the beef steak is getting cold, and I worked hard over those mashed potatoes, and you're letting them get cold on I don't know, but at any rate. Number 8, after Joseph controlled himself and ordered the meal to be served, how was everyone seated? The Egyptians were seated by themselves, and the Hebrew brothers were seated by themselves. The 11 brothers were seated in birth order, age order. So the Egyptians are kind of prejudiced, and they can't stand being around. It's either Canaanites or shepherds. It's either because their occupation is shepherding, they can't stand that, or they're Egyptians and you guys are from Canaan. So it's kind of almost a racial kind of a thing. And we're the elite. We're the people who live here. You guys, you sit at your own table. Probably all of us remember family gatherings, and all the aunts and uncles and cousins are together, and if you're below a certain age, you sit at the kids' table. Remember those times? Yeah, okay. And when you finally, I don't know where it is, 18, 19 years old or something like that, there's a vacant seat, yeah. Somebody couldn't make it to Thanksgiving, so you get the vacant seat. Well, I'm grown up now. I'm at the adult table. You little kids. Well, so there's a discrimination going on in the dining hall. Number 9, did the men notice Yes, they looked at one another in astonishment. So, they're lined up, oldest to youngest, all in proper order, and they're a little weirded out by this, that this is a little weird. Yeah, what are the chances that, we get our name tags by our plate, and this is a little spooky. Who was, number 10, who was given special treatment? Benjamin, whose portion was 5 times. So, yeah, they all get a little, polite portion. Here's your sweet potato, and, here's your bread, and here's your carrots. And, when the guys come out to Benjamin, here you go, son. So, I'm guessing that the atmosphere at this dinner was a little weird, a little strange. They're eating in front of the prime minister and the prime minister's Egyptian staff at a different table. And, it's a little, I'm guessing a little strained. And of course, they still don't know that everything they say among themselves, Joseph knows exactly what they're saying. He doesn't give any indication that he understands everything they're saying, but he does. So, number 11, why do you think Joseph arranged this special treatment? There's 2 possible reasons. It could well be some kind of testing. Are they going to be jealous? Like they were to somebody else that he knew quite well 23 years ago. He has a special coat, and they get mad at him. Or are they okay with Benjamin? Have they grown? Are they beyond that jealousy and beyond that vindictiveness that they felt back then? And it might well be that he loves Benjamin. He's his full brother, and he's going to treat him special. All right, so now out of Genesis 44, question number 12. After the meal, Joseph gave his steward special orders on how to send the men away in the morning. Besides giving them grain and returning their money again, what else did he tell his steward to do? Put my cup, the silver cup, in the mouth of the sack of the youngest. So, if you're like me, you've probably read these chapters over and over and over again, trying to figure out, what is Joseph doing? Why is he doing this? And I think almost without any question, there's got to be some kind of testing. He's still testing his brothers. Are they like they were 23 years ago? Are they still vengeful? Are they still jealous? Are they still looking out for only themselves? Or have they grown a little? Are they better at thinking about other people? I would hate to think that he is just playing mind games to put them through the grinder because he can. He's giving them a little taste of what they did to him. But I don't know. I'm not sure. Joseph is often seen as a model of forgiveness. I'm not sure that he is, at least not yet. If this is forgiveness, it's a pretty rugged brand. This is Joseph, I think, raking them over the coals, testing them, putting them through kind of a grim thing to see how they responded, and testing, but maybe not entirely objective. Maybe some of this is a little bit of vengeance too. I don't know. Put my cup, the silver cup, in the mouth of the sack of the youngest. So he's going to do this to Benjamin, who he gave 5 times the portions to the night before at the dinner. Number 13, shortly after the men left, Joseph told his steward to overtake them and accuse them of stealing his cup. They were so confident of their innocence that they offered the guilty man to be put to death and slavery for the rest of them. Joseph, waiting at his house, accused them himself. What did Judas say? Behold, we are my Lord's slaves. He says, if we've done something wrong, then keep us all as slaves, because he knows they haven't done anything. And he can't conceive of there would be, a silver cup in one of the bags. And why would there be that? So Number 14, Joseph offered to release all the men except the guilty Benjamin. Why do you think he did this? He's testing them. It's the youngest. He knows that he's the baby of the family. He knows that Jacob dotes on him. He's Jacob's favorite, just like Joseph used to be Jacob's favorite. He knows that these brothers they've proven in the past, if something or somebody gets in their way, cut them loose. They did that to him. And so he is testing them. And what a test. They're being confronted with Benjamin becoming a slave for the rest of his life. And as far as they know, that's a real threat. That's not an empty thing. So number 15, Judah then approaches Joseph and tells him of the brothers' conversation with Jacob and how Jacob would die if Benjamin did not return to him. What had Judah become for Benjamin? Surety. So a guarantor. He is a guarantor, like you co-sign on a loan. He's the guarantor, the surety to his father. He had said to Jacob, if I do not bring him back to you, then let me bear the blame before my father forever. That was the promise he made. And so, number 16, what did Judah beg of Joseph? Please let me remain instead of Benjamin as a slave to you, and let Benjamin return with his brothers. So, now this is an interesting thought. When we read these chapters of Genesis, when we hit chapter 37, we say, well, this is the story of Joseph. And it is. From 37 onward, we're dealing with Joseph and his brothers, and they don't like him. He gets sold in Egypt, and all of his ups and downs and adventures and escapades. And Joseph is a major figure from 37 onward, all the way to 50. However, it's possible that this portion of Genesis is a little bit like the book of Ruth. The book of Ruth, when we read the book of Ruth, we think, well, the main character is Ruth, and a primary character alongside Ruth would be Boaz. And that is true. However, what if it weren't entirely or only about Ruth and Boaz? What if it was a lot about, say, Naomi, and the transformation of a bitter, angry, negative woman into somebody who can see the grace of God and who can be a conduit for the grace of God to other people? What if the end of Genesis is not just about Joseph? What if it's about Judah? Why Judah?
That's where David was to come from.
So the tribe of Judah is going to become the line, the lineage of David, and David is going to become the father of Jesus. Judah, and remember now, who is the firstborn? Who is Jacob's firstborn son? Reuben. He doesn't really show up here. Judah is the one who says to the prime minister, and that's all he knows about this guy. He just knows he's the prime minister, and he is threatening to take Benjamin as slave for the rest of his life. Judah steps in, and he says, my Lord, we're really sorry, we're really confused about this whole thing, but you know what? If you were to take my little brother Benjamin as your slave, it would kill our father. He would die of grief. Take me instead. Let Benjamin go. Let him go back with his brothers to Canaan. I will be your slave for the rest of my life. Now, why is that interesting? Judah becoming the substitute. Why is that interesting to us?
Because he was the one who wanted to sell him.
He was in on that. Why else is that interesting? That he would actually be the one who would kind of redeem Benjamin.
No, because Jesus redeemed us. So Jesus did it for us.
This is a picture of Jesus Christ. Judah is a living example of somebody who substitutes himself and takes the penalty for somebody else. He's the one who stands in and says, take me. Give me your anger. You take me as slave. Let my little brother go. Take me. And that is a picture of the Lord Jesus Christ. So Judah is actually, he's kind of in the background, but this is setting the scene for books of the Bible yet to come. The story of the Bible yet to come. Okay, so I'm going to read a couple of verses out of chapter 45. And it is at this point when Judah steps forward. All the brothers are there. They've got the sack opened, and Benjamin is there, and they're all staring at the silver cup. And Joseph has just spoken to them in Egyptian and said, you scoundrels, I knew you guys were cheats, and I'm taking you as slaves. And they, they're all upset. And then he says, well, I'll just take the one that had the cup. And Judah is the one who steps forward. So now, this is the scene. Chapter 45, I'm going to read a few verses for us. Then Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried, have everyone go out from me. So there was no man with him, meaning no Egyptian, when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. He wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard of it. Then Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. Dismayed is putting it mildly. They're like, they're frozen to the floor, and, this is like nightmare fodder. This is terrible in their minds. He's going to for sure kill us all. We know he's the second commander of Egypt. We know that. Why wouldn't he? And in their minds, of course, flooding back everything that they did to him 23 years earlier. So verse 4, then Joseph said to his brothers, please come closer to me. And they came closer, I'm guessing with fear on their faces. And he said, I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. Now do not be grieved or angry with yourselves, because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are still 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvesting. God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant in the earth, and to keep you alive by a great deliverance. Now therefore it was not you who sent me here, but God, and he has made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his household, and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Hurry and go up to my father, and say to him, thus says your son Joseph, God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not delay. You shall live in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me, you and your children, and your children's children, and your flocks, and your herds, and all that you have. There I will also provide for you, for there are still 5 years of famine to come, and you and your household and all that you have would be impoverished. Behold, your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see, that it is my mouth which is speaking to you. Now you must tell my father of all my splendor in Egypt, and all that you have seen, and you must hurry and bring my father down here. Then he fell on his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept on his neck. And then he goes and kisses all of his brothers, and wow. Better than fiction, better than a movie. This is real life that really happened. And this is, isn't it intriguing? Think of all that Joseph has been through, all of his experiences, a lot of them really hard, really harsh. Think about lying in the bottom of that water cistern and pleading with his brothers, and they don't care. Think of being strapped to the back of a camel and riding several days down to Egypt, knowing my brothers just sold me into slavery. Think of getting down there and being sold into Potiphar's house, and you rise to the top, and then Mrs. Potiphar frames you for sexual assault that you didn't do, and now you're in prison. Think of all that Joseph went through, but he has grasped onto his relationship with God. He understands something at least, a great deal, I think, of who God is. And look at what he says again in verse 5. Now do not be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life. Joseph gets it. He understands God was behind the scenes. Even in all those hard, difficult, painful things that he went through, God was lining everything up. And now Joseph says, here I am, and I'm here to be a preserver of life. I'm here to give a great deliverance. Yes, many parallels, many pictures of the Lord Jesus. So, we kind of covered that. In question number 18, what happened next? Joseph could not control himself, his emotions, and he cried, have everyone go out from me. He wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it. Number 19, what did he say? I am Joseph. Could his brothers speak? No, not at all. Number 21, Joseph then had his brothers come closer. What did he say to them? And now, I'm sure that they're trying to process, because he has only ever spoken Egyptian in their presence, and now he's speaking in their language. And so that, their brains are trying to process, wait a minute, he always spoke to us through an interpreter, and he's claiming to be Joseph, but he looks like an Egyptian. And, so this must have been like overload. They're trying to catch up. Do not be, I'm in question 21, do not be grieved or angry with yourselves. He knows them quite well, doesn't he? He knows they all feel guilty. They all feel terrible. They have talked about it in his presence before. With yourselves, because you sold me here for it, God sent me before you to preserve life, to preserve for you a remnant in the earth, and to keep you alive by a great deliverance. Now, therefore, it was not you who sent me here, but God. How much longer will the famine last? 5 years. Question 23. What plan had Joseph formulated? You shall live in the land of Goshen. Goshen is up in the Nile Delta, so it's closer to the Mediterranean, and it was a very lush, green territory. The Nile divided up into streams that ran north into the Mediterranean, and that land was great for pastures. So that's where a lot of cattle, sheep, goats, livestock. That's El Primo land for animal husbandry, and it's away from the centers of population. So the main Egyptian cities are farther down the Nile. And Joseph probably has this planned out too. We'll get to it momentarily, another question. You shall live in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me, you and your children and your flocks and all that you have. I will provide for you. So isn't that interesting? The kid brother that they despised is now literally their lifeline. And he is going to make sure that they have the best food, the best pasture for their flocks. He's going to make sure they have the best houses to live in. He's going to take care of his whole family. Number 24, what did Joseph do after this impassioned speech? He fell on Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept on his neck. So, needless to say, they weren't New Englanders. They showed their emotions, so they weren't like, yeah, bro, good to see you. 23 years, man. Yeah, that's right, fist bump. Yeah. No, they let it show. They were glad to see each other. And so they weep on one another's necks. He kissed all his brothers. Now, that's not weird. That's a cultural thing. That's what you do. And wept on them, and afterward his brothers talked with him. And wouldn't it be interesting to be a fly on the wall listening on that? So I wonder if his emotional response freed them from all their, their guilt and their hesitations. Do they open up and begin saying, it really is you? And why would you want to help us out? Or were they still kind of, stiff? And I don't know. But they did talk, it says. Number 25, what did Pharaoh and his servants think of the news that Joseph's brothers had come? It pleased them. Now remember, this Pharaoh seemed to really love and appreciate Joseph and his family. This Pharaoh thought that Joseph was the greatest thing since sliced bread. They didn't have sliced bread back then. Yeah. But if they did, Joseph is even better than that. So Pharaoh loves Joseph, but it's not until later that Pharaoh dies and a new Pharaoh comes up, and that Pharaoh says, you know what? There's a lot of Jews here. And that's when he begins thinking free labor, slavery. But this Pharaoh, when he gets word, you'll never believe this, Your Majesty, but Joseph's brothers are with him right now in his house. And they think it's wonderful. They love it. And so they're going to, the Egyptian court is going to send wagons with the brothers back to get Jacob and all the family and all their possessions. And come on down. We got a place all set up for you. So it really is an amazing welcome that they're going to get down in Egypt. So Pharaoh agreed with Joseph's plan to have Joseph's family move to Egypt. Number 26, Joseph arranged wagons and gave his brothers parting gifts, especially Benjamin. Wasn't it a whole bunch of clothing? Several changes of clothes, linen, and so on. And I was wondering about that. You got to cart it all the way back up to Canaan, and then you got to bring it all the way back down. But I guess if you got wagons, you're okay. What parting words did Joseph have for them? Do not quarrel. Now, why would he say that? Right, a little family history. Number 27, describe the reunion between Joseph and his father. Just, way over the top. Tearful, joyful, amazing. Jacob says, essentially, I can die a happy man now. I never thought I'd see your face again, and here you are alive. And when he finds out that Joseph has 2 sons, he says, wow, this is amazing. So very, very emotional. 28, when arranging a meeting between his family and Pharaoh, Joseph told his brothers to emphasize that they were shepherds and noted that Egyptians dislike shepherds. Why do you think he did this? First, because it's true, they are shepherds. They watch flocks. But why else? Joseph has been living in Egypt now for 23 years. What has he seen about Egypt? Okay, hygiene and cultural items. Probably, maybe even more important than that, because Joseph himself now looks like an Egyptian. He's got white linen on, he might have, eyeliner and so on. But Joseph has come face to face with the truth that Egyptians are pagans in their religion. They worship every kind of god you can think of and a bunch you can't. They worship all these gods. And Joseph has arranged for his family to be set apart. Probably, largely, because he wants to keep them free from idolatry. Keep them out of Egyptian culture and Egyptian religious influence and like that. So it's probably, it doesn't say, but he did say to them, now when I introduce you to the king, be sure to say, we are shepherds and we've been shepherds our whole life. Everybody we know is a shepherd. And so, the Egyptians will say, well, that's very interesting. We have a special place for you. It's going to be up north. There's great green grass. It's a little far out from the cities, but I'm sure shepherding, you're used to that. And Joseph wanted it that way. He purposely seems to have designed it that way. So to give them their own land and to keep them from Egyptian idolatry. Number 29, what did you learn from these exciting chapters? Rita? Oh, sorry.
That God has a reason for everything, every situation that we're in.
God is always working on something. He's got a project going on all the time, even if we don't understand what it is. Yep. Sharon?
Forgiveness, you certainly learn about.
Yes, forgiving, and you cannot control the other party. If they're going to do something bad again or hurt you again, you can't control that. So I don't think that Joseph, at least up to this point, has been a very good model of forgiveness. Now, okay, things are squared away, and maybe he just felt like he had to test them. But, you know, putting them through what he put them through, wow, that was really something. Other lessons, other applications.
Yeah, trust God. If you're Joseph, look how it ends, or look how
Yeah, we trust God, and Joseph had to trust God when he was in the pit, when his brothers threw him in the pit. He has to trust God when he's a slave in Egypt. He has to trust God when he's a slave in a dungeon in Egypt. And he still has to trust God when he's prime minister, by the way. We don't just trust God in the bad times, we trust him in the good times too. But always, always, we just lean on God. If we think we understand what God is doing, we say to him, Lord, you're in charge, and whatever you're doing is good. If we think we don't understand anything about what God is doing in our lives, we say, God, I don't get it, but I don't have to. You're in charge. Yep.
You think Jacob ever knew the true story?
Yes.
He did.
Yes. Yeah, I think that, how could you cover up after this? And so I'm sure that he remembered the moment that a messenger or an errand boy brought in a bloody tunic and said, is this, he would remember that. And now he finds out, no, that bloody tunic didn't mean that Joseph was eaten by a lion. So I think that he did find out the truth. Yeah. Other comments, questions? Take your prayer bulletins, please.